Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Fix YouTube channel. I hope you're having a really wonderful week. My name is FPL Phillips and today is going to be another episode of Eddie versus the algorithm, where if you're new to the series, I'm taking on a computer generated fantasy football team put together by the Fantasy Football Fix algorithm. It's generating a free hit draft for each game week of the season based on its highest predicted points, and then I'm putting together my own free hit draft for each week. We face them off against each other, and so far it's all square. So it's currently 6-all in the series. After my victory last game week, we've had one draw so far as well. So that brings us up to even apiece. So it's very, very tight. The algorithm is more than holding its own so far this season. You can judge my own ability from what my teams look like, I suppose, if you want. But yeah, let's get into game week 13 anyway. And as always, we'll kick things off with the algorithm's highest predicted point scoring team. So updated score 6-6, as you can see at the bottom of your screen. The algorithm predicted 68 points for this game week. So as we move into the upcoming week, in goal for the algorithm is going to be Andre Onana, who I think on just a general footballing level has not been getting his plaudits enough so far this season. As a Manchester United fan, you can judge if I'm biased, you can judge from your own watching a Manchester United. But I think he's been fantastic, and I think he's been probably best keeper of the season so far. And I think he's more than keeping Manchester United in a number of matches, and a much, much bigger improvement than we've seen from other goalkeepers in comparison to last year, for example. So maybe it's the improvement, maybe I'm being biased as a United fan, but I think Onana's been fantastic, and his FPL point translation has been good as well. He is doing very, very well. United have a home game against Everton up next. I don't particularly think that United will be a very formidable defence. I think at times, Ten Hag's team weren't scoring a lot of goals, so they had to rely on not conceding many to try and get some results in games. I think Ruben Amorim's style will hopefully be a little bit more attacking, a little bit more aggressive, getting forward with the three-back formation that I think is going to take some time to adjust to. So I think United will ship goals over the next coming game weeks. They've of course got Johnny Evans playing in the middle of a back three. They've got centre backs back in training now, but long story short, I think United are going to concede goals for the rest of the season. Basically, Onana is just at that point where he'll concede a lot of shots. Can he keep them out? And if he does keep a clean sheet for a game, you've got a good chance of getting some bonus points in there, because he does make some fantastic saves and he has been racking them up so far this season. So Everton at home could not maybe be as big of an opportunity. They've put some decent XG numbers up in some games so far this season, and Calvert-Lewin just seems to not be able to convert chances, it seems, so maybe that's a good matchup for him against Onana. You can judge for yourself how you think that game's going to go down at Old Trafford. Personally see it being maybe a 2-0 United, so I don't mind this pick at all by the algorithm. I quite like it, in fact. In defence, we're going to see a back three of Veltman, Estupinian, so a double up on Brighton, and then Aina of Nottingham Forest. So 3 home fixtures, again, look very, very nice. It's quite slim pickings this week. When I was looking at the defenders, I was struggling. Didn't put too much consideration. Did look at Estupinian a little bit. Around 5 million for a Brighton defender isn't going to be something that we're really seriously considering as a transfer option, in my view, in my opinion at the moment anyway. Maybe if you've got those Haaland funds going and you've downgraded him, you don't know what to do with your money, you could take a punt on the left back at Brighton. Aina, I think, is a much more nailed-on asset. I think Nottingham Forest are probably a better defence than Brighton as well. Ipswich at home is by no means an easy fixture, though. They've been a team who've been very good going forward so far this season, I should say. And yeah, you are getting some attacking threat, some good bonus point potential in there as well from him. He's probably the pick of those Nottingham Forest defenders, although I think, Murillo, Milenkovic and Alex Moreno also look pretty good. It's quite even amongst that back four, but they're all on a very similar level, I'd say. So if Brighton do manage to keep a clean sheet this week, it's going to be largely due to the fixture, you'd imagine. Southampton at home is probably the best one you could ask for, so I don't mind the double up and the backing of the Brighton boys from the algorithm. So I'm rating this team so far, despite not really going for any of these picks myself at all midfield. Spoilers, it does look very, very similar indeed. Salah, Saka and Palmer, the big guns, all make it in here, probably just because Erling Haaland's not, so the funds are there to be spent. Why not go for these premiums? And I think a lot of us at the moment will be moving to a team structure that does include at least 2 of these guys in our side, maybe even 3 if you haven't owned Haaland for a while and you're able to move funds around. Interestingly, as Palmer taking the captain's armband, we'll be comparing the captaincy in just a moment, so I'll leave that discussion for them. But some nice fixtures across the board, really. I'd even consider the Manchester City game a pretty nice one for Mo Salah. They've been shipping a lot of goals recently. As we know, the confidence doesn't look there for Pep Guardiola's side. So I definitely wouldn't turn my nose up at a Salah captaincy this week either. But it's Mbeumo who takes the vice-captain's armband. Leicester do look pretty poor, especially down their left-hand side as well, which, as we know, Mbeumo's operating on the right-hand side of the Brentford front line usually. So good, should get some chances in that game. And Brentford at home do look very, very good as well. So I like Mbeumo. The fixture run is coming to a bit of an end for Brentford, so it's worth keeping an eye on that. I'm sure you've maybe even made some transfer plans around removing him in 1 or 2 game weeks' time. So just something to keep an eye on. But for this week at least, it does look very good. Maybe one last hurrah for the Brentford boy. And then finally, up front, we're going to see Vissa come in, so a double up on the Brentford attack. It's Danny Welbeck then as well, ahead of João Pedro, which is interesting. And finally, Chris Wood, who's been in some fine form, obviously, so far this season. So I think Chris Wood would definitely be in here for me. João Pedro, spoiler alert, is in my team. I think he's the pick to go for instead of Welbeck. He's looked brilliant since coming back from his injury. He's involved in a lot. The minutes, yeah, might be a bit of an issue for him, but the same kind of goes with Welbeck a little bit. So I would say that there's not too much to separate them there. And then finally, you've got penalties already, if I didn't mention it, going in favour of João Pedro. So that, all in all, I would consider João Pedro to be the pick of the Brighton attackers. Dare I say it, might come back to bite me this week. Maybe the algorithm goes with a selection that ends up, obviously in 1 game week, anything can happen. So Welbeck could quite easily outscore João Pedro, as he has done several times already this year. And Vissa, as I said, Brentford at home can do some big things. Leicester are one of the whipping boys so far this season, I'm sorry to say. So yeah, I don't mind this front line at all again, and overall, it looks like a very nice team, and it plays well into investing a lot of the funds in midfield and investing in some of the value up front, which does seem to be in plentiful supply at the moment. Finally, we'll take a quick peek at the bench then, in case they're needed. Brennan Johnson, who's been firing up some crazy XG numbers at the moment, 0.98 per 90 over the last 3 game weeks. So a very, very good average, ahead of Saka, ahead of Palmer by quite some distance. You know, he's basically, second behind Mo Salah, who's on 1.26 per 90, and then third behind him is Schmodix at Ipswich, who's 0.61 per 90. So quite big gaps there. And Johnson's been putting up some great numbers in the XG department. Not much in terms of assist threat, but if you can find a midfielder who's getting 5 points per goal and getting in some good chances to score, then, you know, they're worth an investment. I think it's just a problem with the fixtures at the moment. The Fulham game is not an easy one. The Spurs fixtures don't look quite as nice as they did a couple game weeks ago. So if you've got Johnson, you could consider holding on to him. I think if you've got him, maybe you have him. If you don't have him, it's not really worth buying now, and there's maybe better options to go for and investing in a mid-price midfielder. We've then finally got De Ligt and Murillo on the final bench option, so there is a double up on that Nottingham Forest bench if something goes terribly wrong, and both defenders there are required. But let's have a look at my team now and see how it compares. So this is my side, the exact same midfield actually, and I did go with Onana in goal too, but the front 3 and the back 3 do have some differences. Chris Wood is the only one who remains from those positions. I've gone with Pedro Porro, I've gone with Kirkez, I've gone with Aït-Nouri. I've picked Kirkez pretty much just based on attacking output. I think Wolves concede a fair few goals. I'm basically back in the Wolves-Bournemouth game to be a high-scoring one. Now, knowing that these teams have scored a decent amount of goals recently, maybe that comes back to bite me and it'll end up being a 0-0. But I feel pretty confident in my investment there. Cunha has looked fantastic. Aït-Nouri just probably is the most attacking of the Wolves defenders by some margin. Kirkez, similar, the same story, but with Bournemouth, so that's why I've gone for those guys. Pedro Porro, I think Spurs will be feeling confident off the back of that 4-0 victory, dare I say it. And yeah, he's been getting into some attacking positions, took his chance magnificently against the Citizens. So yeah, I've just gone with him this week. Rare that you get a defender who scores 2 goals in 1 week, but hopefully he can turn that rarity into a reality. And then João Pedro is taking my captain's armband for this week. That is how confident I feel like he will do well against Southampton. Which, if anything to go on by what I've made with my captaincy calls this season, probably means he'll now blank. So, yeah, I wouldn't recommend captaining him if you're looking for a sensible, rank-concerned decision. But, yeah, he's the one I'm going for this week to have a bit of fun, basically. I had the Ligt on my bench as well. I've also got Amad Diallo in there. Would maybe go for Garnacho instead. I know Amad's played in that right wing back spot. A great assist it was for the Rashford goal against Ipswich. Garnacho scored in the Europa League tonight as I'm recording this. So, haven't seen the highlights from that game yet. hopefully he played well. Would maybe consider having him in, but United assets, I still think it's that point where you give it at least 1 or 2 more weeks before you're looking to bring in the best of the bunch, because there's still a plenty load of options on offer, and we don't really know who's going to be first choice and best for minutes under the new management. And then finally, Leif Davis as my final one. So let's talk about the captaincy now, because there's quite a discussion to be had this week, and 4 key options that I'm comparing next. So those 4 options are Palmer, who took the captain's armband and has the highest predicted point score for the algorithm this game week. We've then got Mbeumo, we've got Salah, and we've got Saka, and they're in order there of predicted points by the algorithm, which I think is pretty interesting. Mbeumo on 6.5, Salah on 6.1, and Saka 5.8. So there's quite a big gap, almost 2.0 points between Palmer, who's first, and Saka, who's fourth. And the ownership, obviously, I think it'll be quite split this week. I think there's going to be a lot of people on Salah just based on recent form. I think you'll get a fair few maybe going for Saka if they own him. And then Mbeumo might be the differential option. And Haaland, I suppose, if people are holding on to him, might be one to go for. It's finding it difficult to back City in that game against Liverpool, but the Premier League often surprises us. So maybe it is one of those weeks where Pep Guardiola gets his team set up right, and they go and make a statement, and they hit the team at the top of the table hard and get a good result. So who knows? I could more than see that happening. On paper, it doesn't look too likely right now. The expected goals conceded of Man City is not looking too good either. You can see 1.58 for them. So Aston Villa actually have a better expected goals conceded, so better defensive numbers. West Ham slightly worse, and Leicester the worst of the bunch, as not surprising anyone. They're 2.12 XGC per 90 for them so far this season. Liverpool looking like the best attack, and Mo Salah on some ridiculous expected FPL points per 90 numbers at the moment. That's taken from the OptaStats tool over on the Fantasy Football Fix website. So if you want to go check that out for yourself, link will be down below in the description. It's how I got all the stats that I mentioned for XG, etc., with the midfield options early on when we were talking about Brennan Johnson. And it's what I use just with my general decision making when I'm looking at stats. I don't have time to watch all the games sometimes. I'll watch the highlights and then I'll look at the data from the game instead. And not all of us are blessed with the time to watch, 10 Premier League games a weekend and make sure that we catch every minute and analyse it all. So for your fellow time strugglers out there, it's a really, really good tool. And obviously I can vouch for it as using it firsthand for over 3 years now, I think. So yeah, enough plugging done. My captain assessment for this week out of these 4, it would be Mo Salah, who would take my captain's armband, with Brian Mbeumo a close second. Palmer doesn't blank too often, and he did blank last game week, so maybe he's due a big haul and a big statement. I think maybe the bias playing into it there is that sometimes Palmer's hold when is not massively expected so far over the last 2 years, and so I don't really mind the algorithm backing him. 7.7 seems like a fair number. The others seem quite low, but I think you could easily captain anyone in this list. And maybe just have a bit of fun with the captaincy this week. I think it is one where, as I mentioned earlier, it'll be quite split. You can go for an option that maybe isn't that popular, and if you're concerned about your rank and it's looking good at the moment, I don't think you should be too worried about dropping hundreds of thousands of places if it doesn't go perfectly well. I touch wood with all that, because obviously FPL is a funny game. Sometimes game weeks go crazy and huge rank swings happen. So yeah, just accept it, embrace it, try and have some fun when you're playing this game. Don't take it too seriously. That's my advice anyway, and how I'm trying to play it so far this season. Because yeah, there's a lot of sweats out there at the moment in FPL, so we try and make it funny. But that's going to wrap up this week's episode of Eddie versus the Algorithm, with a bit of wisdom and stoicism at the end of it there. I hope you did enjoy. If you're new to the channel, then do consider subscribing if you'd like to see more content from myself and the rest of the boys. And yeah, until the next one, I'll hopefully see you soon. Goodbye.